Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video, this time around for The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess for the Nintendo Wii U. An upgraded port of a game that came out almost 10 years ago already. Time flies. And this is obviously an upgraded port of both the Wii and GameCube versions that, again, those games came out 10 years ago, or roughly. As you can see here, I'm a huge fan of not only The Legend of Zelda, but of this game in particular. So I figured I put all these games here and make comparisons as I go through the video. But quick disclaimer, I have not beaten the HD remastered version yet. I'm making my progress slowly but surely. I'm making my progress through the game. But I've already beaten the Wii version when it first came out, so I already know everything about the story, how long the game is, or all the dungeons and everything like that. So I figured I'd make this video just to voice my opinion and talk a little bit about the upgrades of the remastered version, and give a little bit of my background with this game, because I know this was a very highly anticipated game ever since it was announced. I guess its conception dates all the way back to Space World 2000, when Nintendo showed the first footage of the matured and adult Zelda game that they were working on. And again, this is all the way back to 2000, even before the GameCube was released, I believe. So a lot of people were hyped because Ocarina of Time was a fantastic game that got perfect reviews for the most part, and to this point it's regarded as one of the best games of all time. So people were looking forward to the successor of that game in the next generation console from Nintendo, which at the time was the Nintendo GameCube. So then Nintendo dropped the bomb and they surprised everybody by years later they showcased the Wind Waker. And that game got a ton of negative backlash. And I'm talking about, this is the early, well, I guess not early, but earlier internet days back then, you know, the IGN boards and everything. Everybody exploded. People were expecting a realistic and a mature Zelda game like Nintendo showed years before in Space World, but what they ended up getting is a kitty, a cel-shaded looking Zelda game with a kitty-looking Link cartoon character, and people were very, very furious. Myself, I was hoping that it would be a realistic 3D Zelda, but I was not upset to the point where, you know, people were, you know, writing on the internet going crazy and stuff like that. So, in fact, I bought Wind Waker day one and I loved that game, and it's one of my favorite Zelda games as well. So, but yeah, the damage was somewhat done. And it's funny because nowadays when people talk about the Wind Waker, I think it's looked upon as one of the best Zelda games. And funnily enough, it's one of the most iconic from an art direction perspective. I think it's one of the best looking Zelda games. So I think it was just a knee-jerk reaction at the time of fans just expecting a more realistic Zelda. Of course, that all changed during E3 of, I believe it was 2004 or maybe 5, when Reggie Fils-Aimé unveiled Twilight Princess footage for the first time. At the time, it was announced as a GameCube game, and that video is famous. If you guys look it up, I think it's E3 2004 Twilight Princess reveal. It's one of the most, I guess, best reactions of all time in E3. People were jumping out of their seats, clapping. There were journalists that were crying of emotion. People were just screaming, going crazy. I've never seen an E3 reaction like this. Not even close. And people were so excited because finally that realistic Zelda that was presented a few years back was finally making its way to the Nintendo GameCube. And then the game got delayed, and of course, as we all know, it was actually released on the Wii, on the Wii version first. So, which takes me back to my background with the game. Before I start talking about the graphics and everything, I think it's a little bit interesting to, you know, to add a little bit of the story background of this game and me. Around 2006, which is the year the Wii came out, my GameCube laser reader finally died out, and I'm saying finally because my GameCube, my launch unit GameCube went through some use and abuse. Playing Smash Brothers, Zelda Wind Waker, Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil Zero, Metroid Prime, Smash Brothers, Melee, you guys name it. That game had hundreds or thousands of hours of gameplay time. So also travels back and forth between South America and North America, and just a lot of use and abuse. So finally, my GameCube still works. It's just the laser disc reader, the lens that shoots the red laser that died. So it just so happens that that happened in '06 when that was the year that Wii was going to be released. And I have to admit, guys, I like Nintendo. They're basically my favorite company because in my opinion, they make the best games. But I was very upset at them when they revealed the Wii. I thought it was a very bad idea. I was not excited for it at all, and to the point where I said to myself, I am not going to buy a Nintendo Wii. There's no way. I don't want any of this motion controls thing. I just want a regular gaming experience, and Nintendo is not going to deliver that. So my initial reaction was, I'm gonna have to buy a new GameCube, with a brand new laser reader or whatever. That way I can experience, because I had a pretty big library of GameCube games. So in order for that not to go to waste, I figured I might as well get a new GameCube, and that way I can buy the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess when it comes out finally for the system. But as the November 18, I think it was, date approached of 2006, which was the Wii launch, I think a month before the Wii launch officially, Nintendo posted the intro of Twilight Princess on YouTube. And I'm talking about the game intro when Link is riding Epona and he crosses the bridge, and then Link disappears with Epona, and then the next picture and image is Link being a wolf and he howling at the Twilight at Hyrule Castle enshrouded in the twilight. And the first time I've watched that trailer, I got goosebumps and my eyes teared up a little bit. Being a huge Zelda fan, my jaw just dropped. Everything about that intro video was just epic. That's the right word to describe this. It was just such a magnificent intro to a game that I was highly anticipating, that I told myself, you know what? I think I'm gonna have to get this Wii thing in order to play this game right here. I knew the GameCube version was coming a few months after that, but I figured, you know what? I might as well get a Nintendo Wii. That way I can play this game on day one. But also the Wii was backwards compatible with the GameCube, so my GameCube collection was not going to go to waste. So that was the second advantage of the Wii. And the third advantage is obviously the Wii games themselves. I figured in the long run, there will be more Zelda games coming out for the system. There will be new Mario games coming out for the system, a new Smash Brothers, a new Metroid game. So I figure, even though the motion controls did not really excite me at all, really, I figured I might as well pay, the extra money and get myself a Nintendo Wii on launch day so I can play Zelda and any future games that may come out for the system. So that's exactly what I did. I spent, like 6-7 hours in line. It wasn't a midnight launch. It was I went to a Target, waited in the cold, and finally I got my Nintendo Wii with only one game. Wii Sports was bundled with the system, and of course the only other game that I got during that day was this game right here, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And of course I went to the dorm. At the time I was in college, I drove like crazy, got to the dorm, unboxed the Wii, plugged it in. My roommates were just waking up, cause, they did not go with me with to the launch, the Wii launch. And, we ended up playing Wii Sports for like 5 or 6 hours straight, which, I told myself Wii Sports is like the worst game ever. I cannot believe Nintendo's doing this. Those graphics look like crap. What is this motion control bullshit? I don't want anything to deal with it. And I remember when my roommates came and they were like, "Hey, before you put Zelda in, why don't we try this demo, Wii Sports?" And I told them, "No, it's crap." They were like, "No, come on, let's try it." And we ended up playing the game for like the whole day, 5 or 6 hours straight. Which at that point I realized what the Wii was, and and the potential of the system. So my opinion of the Wii changed. It's not my favorite console by far or anything like that. But I went from being a Wii hater to a Wii happy owner, I guess, because Wii Sports, it was just fantastic. We had so much fun playing that game back in the college days. But right after that Wii Sports evening, with my roommates passed, I was finally able to kick them out of my room, lock the doors, turn the lights off, and play The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And man, I was blown away by this game. I still hold my stance that this is one of the best Zelda games. And in fact, I consider Ocarina of Time as the best game of all time. I can go on for hours explaining why that game is the best game of all time. But honestly speaking, I think Twilight Princess does everything that Ocarina of Time did much better. That doesn't make it a better game per se, because it doesn't have that influence that Ocarina of Time had back in its day, back in 1998. But Twilight Princess obviously has better graphics, which is pretty obvious. But other than that, the gameplay is more fluid. The Z targeting system is it's more advanced, more polished, obviously, than the Nintendo 64 version. The dungeons, in my opinion, are better designed for the most part. I think it's almost like a coin toss, really, as far as the quality of the dungeons between Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess. But Twilight Princess has a fantastic dungeon design, a very interesting boss battles, just the overall scope, the overworld, Hyrule. I think there's much more things to do in Twilight Princess. There are more hidden spots where you can get, heart pieces, go on the bug collection and all the collectibles and all that. So again, Twilight Princess improved what Ocarina of Time did, in a very good way. And I think a lot of people got burned by that because they were expecting something completely different, maybe. So I know there's a few people out there that don't consider Twilight Princess to be among the best Zelda games. I think the overall consensus is that this is a good Zelda game. But some people just don't think it's good enough to be among the top ones. Me personally, I think this might be my second favorite 3D Zelda game. Again, because of the quality of the dungeon design, and again, the Wii version is the one that I originally beat. It took me around, I think, between 42 or 47 hours. I can't remember what my final playtime was, but I beat the game in about a month, playing different amount of hours every day. And I was completely happy with the experience. The motion controls did not really do anything for me, which is waggling the controller left and right, the sword motion, which brings me back to the improvements of the remastered version, in which you can play with a regular controller, which is highly recommended in my opinion. You can play with a gamepad or you can play with a Wii U Pro controller. And the cool thing about the Wii U version, the remaster, is that it gives you different ways to play the game. There's a hero mode which contains the flipped or the original. It depends on what you consider the original. To me, the original Twilight Princess is the Wii version because it was released first. But some people say no, the original one is the GameCube version because it was the original intention of Nintendo to first release it on the GameCube. However you want to guys call this, the remaster contains the hero mode, which has the flipped world that's available in the Wii version of the game, which is the right-handed Link, basically. Link holds the sword in his right hand. But if you play the normal or original mode, then the game is on the right, direction, and Link is holding the sword on the left side, I guess. And that one is the GameCube version, which is the one I'm playing here on the remastered version. I'm playing the GameCube perspective, if you want to call it that, which is cool because again, I already completed the Wii version of Twilight Princess, and everything that I remember about the game, it's funny because I only completed this game once, and I think it says a lot about a game that you only beat the game once, but you still remember most of the things that happen in the game. I think that's a true statement of a good game. Usually, some games are just forgettable experiences that, years after you beat the game, you try to remember what you actually did in the game, but you don't really remember anything. But Twilight Princess, I still have some vivid memories of different dungeons throughout the game, and that speaks to itself, to the enjoyment that I found in this game. So now that I'm playing the remastered version, it's kind of hard because for example, when I got to the second temple or dungeon in the Goron Mines, I was like, well, I remember this, but it looks weird. And of course, it looks weird because I keep remembering the Wii version, which was the flipped one. So in a way, it's a pretty cool way to replay the game because certain things are different, obviously, and everything is flipped. So it's an interesting and fresh experience for me to be playing it on the Wii U remastered version. Now I do have to say that I did play the GameCube version, but I only made it right before the second dungeon, which is the Goron Mines. I got the GameCube version much later. If you guys watch my pickup videos, I think a year and a half ago, that's when I finally got the GameCube version, just for collecting purposes, really, because I already beat the game on the Wii version, like I said, but I really wanted to have the GameCube version for collection purposes. And now that I have the Wii U version, obviously this is the definitive one because of the graphics and just the different game modes that I was explaining. Speaking of graphics, the upgrades are there and they're not substantial, which is understandable. This is a true definition of a HD port, really, because the improvements are basically based on improved textures, which is a very nice thing of Nintendo to do because the original textures on the Wii and GameCube versions are pretty rough looking by today's standards. We're all spoiled by PS3, PS4, Xbox 360 One graphics that it's really hard to go back to a PS2/GameCube era type of game, and seeing those textures really can cause an eyesore as you play the game. The Wii U version remedies that by improving the resolution of the textures, but you can still see some rough edges along the textures and the overall geometry of the world. The mountains, the rocks in the ground, and everything like that. The 3D character models were also improved, but again, you can see signs of this being an HD port. But overall, I think it's a pretty good job on behalf of Nintendo. Bringing this game into an HD version. I think they did a pretty good job, and it's worth checking the game out as an improvement over the two games that were originally released. As far as the soundtrack, if you guys have never played this game has a fantastic soundtrack, and I actually regret buying this from Best Buy, which is my go-to location because I get 20% discount. But GameStop here in North America, they had a pre-order bonus of, if you pre-order the game there, you got the soundtrack CD for Twilight Princess, which I did not know that until, I already purchased this through Best Buy. So, it's a shame that, I missed on that because this game has a truly fantastic soundtrack. Of course, I can remedy that by downloading the MP3s and all that, but it would have been nice to have the CD in my collection. Because I really enjoyed the Twilight Princess soundtrack, which it suits the art direction and the mood of the game pretty well. Because this game has a very dark theme, which is I guess not very common in Zelda games. There are some dark themes. It's a darker than usual type of Zelda game, somewhat like Majora's Mask, which also has a very unique feel to it, very unique atmosphere. A very unique mood set in the game, and that's one of the reasons why I like this game. I think it has a lot of personality, despite the obvious things that are common in a Zelda game, such as the characters not speaking. Everything is text-based basically. So I think the game has a pretty interesting art direction with the whole Twilight world switching back and forth that happens in the game, which I guess leads me to the gameplay. If you guys haven't played this game, basically the story, in the story you have to free the Kingdom of Hyrule from falling into twilight. So there are sections of Hyrule that you have to travel one by one and restore the light to those sections that are being basically consumed by the twilight. And this evil king of the Twilight, I guess, universe, which is called Zant. He's the one responsible for this, so it's your job, guiding Link, restoring the light in the Kingdom of Hyrule, and finally putting an end to Zant's evil master plan. So originally, it's a cool thing because Ganon is nowhere to be seen. I don't want to spoil too many things, but Zant is technically the main antagonist for most of the game, and a lot of people have complained about the way that this game started. A lot of people complain that Twilight Princess has a very slow start, and I think it's true. But I find it to be enjoyable nevertheless, because it's your typical Zelda introduction in which you start off as a character, which is Link, but you're not a hero to begin with. You're just you work at a ranch, like with goats and taking care of Epona, your horse, and all that. So you're not a hero at the beginning of the game, obviously. And as the tutorial of the game progresses, which is basically that intro portion of the game, things happen, and then you earn the sword and the shield, and then slowly you get to know who this Link character is. You get to know who the people that live in the Orden village, which is where you're originally from, are. You get to have a feel of who these people are, their personalities, and so forth. And it does take maybe a couple of hours before you finally get into the meat and potatoes of the game, where you assume the role of being the hero of Hyrule, and you finally wear your green tunic, and you're out there riding Epona out in the field, going from dungeon to dungeon. So it does take some setup. It does take some time to finally reach that point. And another thing that people complain that slowed down the gameplay is the Wolf Link mechanics, which pretty early in the game you stumble across this story element in which you transform into a wolf version, and you basically play those sections in the Twilight version of that universe. So it's your job, your initial job is to get all the 12, I forgot what it was called, the light portions or whatever. Originally, I believe in the Wii version and the GameCube version, you have to collect 16 tiers of light. And one cool thing about the new remastered version is I believe they dropped down from 16 to 12. So you don't have to collect all the tiers of light originally like you did in these two versions right here. So it expedites that collectathon portion of the game, which a lot of people complain. A lot of people are not pretty big fans of that. And I understand and I agree with them, actually. I think the original one extended those tiers of lights collection parts a little bit too long, and the Wii U version finally does a good job of making those sections shorter. But I think they're fundamental in the sense that they make you explore the area that you're about to enter in a good way. So you get familiarized with the different settings and the different locations of that particular area. So I think the tiers of light sections are needed. They have to be there. They just don't have to be as long as they originally were. So that's a good thing about the Wii U remastered version that they fixed. Other things that the Wii U version, I guess, includes is the amiibo support, which is actually a pretty interesting use, if you will, especially if you guys like a good challenge, because if you play Hero mode, which is unlocked from the start in the Wii U version, your character Link takes double damage. But if you have the Ganondorf amiibo and you use it, you can up that to quadruple damage, because if you use the Ganondorf amiibo, you also take twice as much damage. So if you play on hero mode plus the amiibo Ganondorf figure, then you will be in trouble, and you will be for a good challenge, because some of the complaints were that the original game was a little bit too easy. I can relate to that. I think the game is leans towards the easy side as far as combat and boss battles and all of that. For me, it's not a major issue, because to me the game was enjoyable either way. But yeah, this game does have an easier gameplay and boss battles than other Zelda games. So that complaint was addressed in the Wii U version by adding the hero mode and the Ganondorf amiibo support. If you think it's too hard, or you want to make this game even easier than it already is, you can use the Zelda and Link amiibo figures, and I believe you get more hearts every time you use those figures. So if you're running low on health, I guess you can always put the amiibos in. Personally, I haven't used any of the amiibos yet. I'm just playing the game normally, like I would without amiibos. And finally, we have the Wolf Link amiibo, which I have not opened yet, because I'm still waiting on Nintendo or releasing this amiibo separately, but it doesn't look like they will. And this amiibo unlocks a challenge cave, which there's already one in the game, the Cave of Ordeals, I think it's called. I remember playing on the Wii version and going wave after wave of enemies, and you get good prizes like heart pieces and stuff, or rupees, by clearing out the waves of enemies. So apparently, if you use the Wolf amiibo, there's another cave that does the same thing. So if you want more of a challenge, or you want to explore that new cave, I guess you have to use the Wolf amiibo, Wolf Link amiibo. So yeah, overall, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, guys, it's one of my favorite Zelda games. If I had to talk about the dungeons a little bit, I would say that the design is very solid. I really like the flow that each dungeon has, the balance between the puzzles. The items in Twilight Princess, I think, are very memorable. The claw shot, the double claw shot that you get later on in the game when you reach the city in the sky, which is a fantastic dungeon. A lot of cool looking puzzles, a lot of weird interactions with the people that live in the city in the sky. Then you have that Snow Peak dungeon, which I thought it was very atmospheric, very it had a special mood. That's the one, that mansion in the snow forest. I have a lot of fun memories playing that, and I cannot wait until I make it to that. I'm currently in the third dungeon, which is the lake dungeon in the Wii U version. But as I slowly make my way through it, I'm sure I'll enjoy the Snow Peak mansion dungeon, which was fantastic. And of course, the lake bed dungeon is fantastic as well. I remember there were some pretty cool puzzles. And going back to the items, the claw shot, the iron boots in this game are pretty fun to use. There are some pretty clever uses in the second dungeon. The Goron mines, and how you have to use the iron boots to do the sumo wrestling with the Goron leader, and you have to use the iron boots in clever ways to use the magnetic traps to attach to the minerals, and then use that to defeat the boss battles and everything like that. So a pretty clever use of the items within the dungeons that make this game very enjoyable, in my opinion. And of course, the spinner, that's another classic item that Twilight Princess introduced. It's one of the most fun and I guess unique items to use in a Zelda game. That was another very fun new item to use in Twilight Princess. So overall, I think the design of the dungeons, it's very solid. I don't think anybody can argue that. If you guys think of a way why the dungeons are bad in this game, please let me know, because I think they're pretty well cleverly designed. They have pretty clever shortcuts, puzzles, and the overall flow is pretty good and pretty natural. So I really enjoyed the dungeons in this game. One thing that I did notice by playing the Wii U version is that this is definitely a retro game, and by that I mean the lack of detail in some of the environments. When you go inside Hyrule Castle, even though the textures are improved, you can see a certain lack of detail. which it may sound like a negative thing, but it's also a positive thing. Like we're so spoiled by modern games that have a ton of details. When you play The Last of Us, if you go inside a house or a room, you're gonna see a million different details. In the furniture, you're gonna see, the furniture, posters in the wall, paintings, different things that are pretty good. Don't get me wrong. And even in simpler games like Bloodborne, for example, when you are within the villages and you see, for example, the exterior of a house, you can see the texture of the bricks on the outside walls, and then you have the window, and then the window has a wood texture with like a torch right next to it, and then you see a door with the iron knob and things like that. It's very detailed. Whereas in Twilight Princess, you go back, this is a PS2/GameCube era game. The walls in the castles are just a texture of gray bricks. And it takes me back to a simpler time in gaming, obviously, but it goes to show that the graphical details in a game are not necessary for the game to be enjoyable. And I think that's something that it's harder and harder to appreciate by the newer gamers. I think newer gamers are going to have a tougher time accepting and getting into games like this. Just because of the lack of detail, the lack of graphical spectacle that modern games offer. So in a way, if you were alive back in '06 and you played this game for the first time, you'll know exactly what I mean. The game focuses on the gameplay, on the dungeon design, on the puzzles, and on using the items, and not necessarily in wowing you with the graphics. Which again, they made pretty nice improvements for this version, I thought. And as far as the overworld, there's plenty of things to do. Well, I shouldn't say plenty of things to do. A lot of people complain also that the overworld was not vastly improved versus Ocarina of Time. But I think there's more stuff to do. There's some pretty clever hidden heart pieces here and there. You have the bugs collection. Side quests in which you have to bring all those bugs to the bug girl in the castle town and things like that. So there's enough side content to keep you entertained and busy and away from the main story of the game, which is one of my favorite things about the Zelda games, that you can focus on the main story but take a little bit of time off to maybe collect a few hard pieces here and there, or maybe do some side quests for the villagers or people that are requesting side quests and so forth. So there's a very nice balance within the game that it's highly appreciated. So overall, guys, I think The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess for the Wii U, it's a very worthy purchase. Even if you guys have played either the Wii or the GameCube version, I think there are enough improvements to warrant a replay of this game. Personally, again, this is one of my favorite 3D Zelda games. I truly think it's a masterpiece. It's one of my favorite games of last generation, probably top 3, which it may sound weird because when I say last generation, that's Wii, PS3, and 360. But this game was originally a GameCube game, so I know it's a little bit of a weird territory for this game to thread on. But again, the Wii version is one of my favorite games of last generation, just because of the overall enjoyment that I had with this game. I bought the Wii on day one. This game is responsible for spending $250, over $300, because I bought this plus the Wii, obviously. And this is the responsible right here, and no regrets. It was money well spent just to experience this game at launch day. It was a fantastic experience. So expect to play this game anywhere between 35 to 60 hours. It all depends on how big of a completionist you are or how big of a challenge seeker you are. But on average, it takes about 42 to 50 hours to finish a Zelda game. So. Sorry guys, the video got cut off, but I was just in my closing statements. If you're a Zelda fan, go ahead, buy this game. I think you'll find a lot of enjoyment. If you're new to the Zelda series, I think you're gonna find a lot of interesting things that have made The Legend of Zelda what it is today. The typical dungeon and puzzle solving and exploration. So yeah, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, a fantastic Zelda 3D game to be enjoyed by a lot of you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.